I'll start with a few questions, then we'll open it up. I guess a question for Ognjen first. It's a fiction film that is based on an actual incident, but it's also an incident that is sort of surrounded by this culture of silence and secrecy. And it's an incident from 1999 when you were a teenager, 14. Okay, so can you maybe just talk a little bit about what you remember of that period, and also when you actually became aware of this particular incident?
Well, as you said, the film is about something that's invisible, and at that time it was completely invisible to us, to our generation. It was completely prohibited, these kind of stories and images that were happening to someone else. The film started as a story about this, but then it became more of a film of a clash between this story that was prohibited, these images that we were never allowed to see, these stories that we were not allowed to hear, and clash of that with our own memories, with my own memories from that time. And at that time, as you said, I was 14, and when the bombing started, you know, in the first few days you were very afraid, of course. I was very afraid, and but then you just realized that the only way to fight it was just to behave normally, like it's not happening, like the bombs are not there. You go out and play football while the factory is burning, you know, behind you. And I also remember this paranoia among people, but also the biggest solidarity among people. And me and my friends, we were doing some of the stuff that you see in the film, like burning the hay. I was at the same time, as much as I remember this bombing, I remember also falling in love with music. And for me, it was always important not to make this film into just one thing, you know. It was always about this also. When I think about it now, it was mostly my maybe childish way of rebellion, you know, to listening to punk music, wanting to have a band. And for me, the film is more about this, you know, these feelings than the story.
So it's interesting that this film sort of takes shape as a combination of like memory on the one hand and research on the other. You know, I'm wondering if you can talk about that aspect of this thing that was hidden from view. That.
Well, I first heard about it 10 years after the fact. Yeah. 10 years after it happened. And I started asking around. I started with the research almost immediately. And almost nobody knew anything about it, like my parents, my professors at the time I was a student. And it came out of this need to speak about it, to be more curious and to, I don't know, make this place that it was a place of, you know, that nobody knew anything about, to make it into a place of knowledge with the film. And then in the end, as you say, it became a way of fighting for this memory. It became about this memory. It became about, when I thought a lot about these monuments, and about the monuments that were scattered all around the ex-country, old Yugoslavia, and that when you see the places of killings and crimes and massacres from the war that happened during my lifetime, there are no memorials, no monuments. And then it became also about the story of more personal. I needed to make it more mine, because it took us 7 years to make it. And in order to stay with it for a longer time, you know, it couldn't just stay a story. It needed to be something. And then that's also for me about the memory of maybe not my direct input with this word, but my father's. And the talks that I had with my father, who was twice drafted for wars during the 90s, and the questions, you know, that I asked him. So in a way, the perspective started to shift also in the film, and for me it became more of a film about what did one generation leave to another than about this crime. And this question of transmission became heritage became very important, and in a way, in the end, I also put a lot of this country, or the death of one country and the values of this country. And it became also a way to fight for the memory of these values.
Tatjana, I wonder if you have anything to add to that. I mean, you also grew up in Serbia in a similar generation. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit older. I was 18 years old when the bombing started. And just like a fun fact, if you can call it that, like we were living our lives, our best lives in that period, which is total insane because you're just being attacked by invisible, force, just bombs flying. So people kind of, gather together, and I remember we were 18, we were kids, but we were partying a lot, and and it was crazy totally, because I guess that's like because you don't know what will happen tomorrow, and so it was really chaotic. And I'm happy that Augie made this movie, and make it so personal also. So.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, you alluded to this years-long process of getting the film off the ground, and how that shaped the film. And I'm especially interested in the fact that you actually made a documentary about the same incident, which Tatjana, you worked on as well, called Depth 2 from a few years ago, which is a much more like sort of information. There's much more information in that film. Actually, it's a kind of great companion piece to The Load. I mean, this film is very withholding, but that film actually reveals a lot about what happened. If you can maybe say a bit about the impetus to make that film, and also how making that film informed making the fiction film.
Well, yeah, I mean, I got an idea for this film in 2009, but I really started working on it in 2011 when I finished my university. I was studying film directing, and then we founded a production house in order to apply for money from the Film Center of Serbia, which is basically the only institution that can give you the money for a film in my country. You can have maybe some private money, but they are only reserved for some bigger names or bigger films. And we were like first-time filmmakers at that time, and we were denied, of course, and we were denied the next 6 years for the money in Serbia. So that's basically the reason why it took so long to finance it, because we have to start finding the small amounts of money in each of the countries that had some grants or funds that are open to financing bit by bit this kind of film. And the reason why we didn't get the money, I don't know. I mean, sure, everybody thinks that it's because of the subject and because it's not so, it's basically still a taboo in a way. But I also think it's because of the style, the language, that maybe not a lot of people who sit in those commissions could read, because as you say, the film, in the script it was even less. The script was, I heard complaints that there's no story, there's no characters, and I think that the people who are sitting in the commissions from the film center are usually very old school in this way. So I think this is also the reason. But all these years I was researching the crime, and in one point I had hundreds of pages of transcripts from the trials, photographs, documents, lists, photographs of the places where it took place. And I didn't want to include it into this story of one guy, like one tiny screw of this machine, and one day of his life. And reading these transcripts, I started imagining the story, the action, how it took place, and eventually I got an idea to make a film with only like these testimonies, these voiceovers, and we decided to then use a film to also do location scouting for The Load. So basically Depth 2 is only locations, empty locations with these voiceovers. And we shot it very quickly, and we shot it with almost no money. Like the budget was 10,000 euros for a feature-length film. And it kind of helped me not think a lot about producing, because at that time I was only thinking about producing The Load, and this kept me occupied for a year and a half with filmmaking. And yeah, after that film, when I returned to the script, I realized I said a lot. As you said, it's more about the case, about this conspiracy of silence, about the organization, the structure of the crime. You hear the perpetrators, the real perpetrators, you hear a victim. And when I returned to the script, I cut a lot of things connected to the crime and put a lot more things that are personal.
So in Depth 2, were those actual locations? That
almost all, but yeah, it's not all.
And in this one, and in The Load, it's not
Zero.
so. Okay.
Zero, because Depth 2 was Tatjana can say how we shot it. You know.
Yeah, I mean, working on that too was interesting because, as Ogi said, he had these transcriptions, hundreds of hours of pen pages, you know, of these trials, and at the end he decided to choose only people who were involved in the crime, you know, and that kind of was our leading, you know, path, like where are we going, what are we shooting, and then we decided that we're not going to show any faces, so the documentary is completely empty places without any people in it, and what that did was, you know, it was so powerful because the audience, you know, you were letting the audience to imagine what was going on while watching those empty places and just listening to those people talking from off screen, and that's also always powerful, you know, like reading a book, you know, and then you see a movie, you're always more, you know, interested about book than the movie. And while we were shooting it, we kind of decided to just have these slow pannings, you know, slow camera movement. So it works like it hypnotizes the audience almost, you know, and that's the style of the documentary. And then we just decided, okay, we're going to keep this camera movement in the load also, and also that decision was kept in the load because Ogi is a great director because although, you know, he knows what he wants or doesn't know what he wants, he's always trying to find the best solution during the filming. And although the filming was very crazy, we shot it for 4 or 5 weeks. We had 45 locations in that period, so it was really, really fast. And that's the reason why there's minimal, you know, lighting. There's minimum film lights in this movie. There are lights, but they're really small. And while shooting it, we realized that, you know, no, we cannot make 15, 20, 30 shots a day. We're just going to make a couple of shots, 10 shots, you know. So all the shots are very slow, and that's where the camera movement came also.
But just to say that when we shot Dep 2, there was 3 of us, 1 car. And we could sneak into Kosovo because Serbia still doesn't recognize Kosovo as an independent state. So we could sneak without saying that we will shoot a film. You know, so we just went to the real locations. We were pretending that we are some TV crew. So we will shoot only the empty location and go to another place. And with the load, there was like 50 of us, 100 of us, 10 trucks. It was impossible to get the permits and to shoot. And in the end, I didn't want to use these locations again and to use them as a fetish. Or, you know.
Yeah, it's still very fresh back home, you know. That war is fresh and people there don't agree yet. So just making this film was crazy, you know. We had to hide or
we had a fake name of a film when we shot in Serbia.
When we
like
were shooting the load, it was, what was
fake
the name?
synopsis, fake name.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the structure of the film? I mean, you say on the script that, you know, there's not much narrative, not much happens, but in some ways it is like a very classical story because it's a journey. It's point A to point B. It's very linear, but it's also striking that there are a lot of tangents along the way, a lot of digressions where, you know, the camera, the point of view departs from the main character, which I think is quite an interesting decision.
Yeah, that came later on. When I returned to the script and when I realized, as you said, that it was basically about this guy and this one line of from A to B and then learning the truth coming to your family, when I started putting more and more these references to me and my father and to some stories about this, and when I realized that I need this story between him and his son to be longer in the film, and when I put the story of this nut, then everything in the film had to lead to this transmission, then with a cassette and with a photo camera. And the film basically became this transmission of heritage, and I needed to highlight this younger generation. And as this story is about a tree or a seed, I realized, okay, maybe this film is also should be that, you know, especially in my country. There won't be any monuments, there won't be any normal discussion about it. So there were, and in a way, it needs time. It took us 20 years to make this film after it happened. Like it took like 10 or 15 years for this tree to grow up. So for me, this film was like this. And then I had, okay, this one line which is like a tree, and then I have these branches, you know, with these stories. And it was also a way not to be, I had to kill this narrative, this plot. I realized that it cannot depend that much on a plot, and that I needed these people, these parallel stories, parallel lives, these people who have problems that are not connected to the main story, that are not connected even to the war, that have secrets of their own. And just to loosen this plot, because I think that plot is very connected, the people who are very dependent on a plot are very connected with this nationalistic way of thinking. I think that plot, like, there's always a plot with the fascists, you know, there's always a plot. So for me it was like I had to destroy it in a way. And I realized that my character cannot be a hero, you know, he cannot be a hero, he is just, you know, from all sides, you know, he just tried to survive in this hell, you know. And these two things are also that I betray all of these elements of thriller or mystery or tension.
I had a couple of sort of production questions for you both before we take a couple from the audience. I'm curious about the challenges of making a period piece of the recent past and of a very particular period. You know, I mean, it's to recreate 1999. If you can talk a bit about that.
Well, it was not that hard. I mean, we basically shot at the places that still look like that. The biggest problem actually was that it's a period piece, but also road movie. So the cars.
Yeah.
The cars were the biggest problem, and we had to block the roads. And in the end, we wanted to have this empty roads, you know. But then you have the wedding, then you have this, you know, even the crash, and so we needed the cars that were old in 1999, you know, that were old at that time, and then the costumes, and it became a game. I mean, we enjoyed it. We didn't have a lot of budget, so we prepared a lot of this. We bought a lot of, you know, clothes like for the flea markets, and yeah, I mean, it was very prepared. As Tatjana said, we had a very small amount of time and very big amount of locations, and some of the scenes were kind of complicated. But yeah, maybe Tatjana can say something about the. Yeah.
I'm very happy with the production design and, you know, costume design. I mean, it looks real. That's what it looked. 1999. That's it. I mean, but as Ogi said, it wasn't that hard because a lot of our country still, unfortunately, looks like this still. Yeah.
And then you have the war thing with the pyrotechnics and the special effects. That also we worked with people before on one of our short films who did great fireworks. So we worked with them also for the special effects, and there.
Two shots have fireworks, right? Those are two shots, yeah.
And the pyrotechnics, which was the most expensive actually thing. And then you have the truck, you know, which I mean, the decision was always that the camera will always be inside the truck. So we chose the locations and everything through the window. You know, we were driving, and then you see, and then in a way it's easier to control it when you have only this one position. And I think I have 3 or 4 positions in the truck. And then when this stops, the camera is basically panning, and it shows a lot. So yeah, I mean, the truck story is funny. We bought 2 exactly the same trucks, and we destroyed one. So we had one that was working and one that we cut in half and put on a third truck. And yeah, so it's a production funny.
All right, I think we're going to take a few audience questions. We have time for a couple. And I think we have a microphone as well. So if you raise your hand, we'll send a mic to you. Yep, here.
Thank you. I mean, I have a comment and a question. My comment is just the level. What intrigued me most was the pace of your film and the patience with the storyline as well as with the camera movements. My question is, your ending, was it something that you knew beforehand or something that you found in post? And what made you say this is the end here?
When I put this story in the end, I knew that it has to be, it's the center for me of the film, so everything leads to it. And it's kind of personal for me. I mean, this kid who wants to start a band, and you have the other kid whose band broke up, and then you have the main character who picks up the camera. So for me, to document, to keep the memory, or to act. So for me, this is kind of my story. I mean, I also wanted to have a band during the bombing. Then when I finished high school, my band broke up and I picked up a camera. I started making films. So for me, this was very also personal. And as you say about the pace and the rhythm was, yeah, for me the film is this, you know, this shape of a tree and this rhythm. And I think you mostly connect with it, mostly with it than the story. And the way that the script was written, it like gave us a lot of space in the shooting, even in this small amount of days, to create on the spot, not just to came to the shooting and then shoot what's in the script, you know. So it was basically very, very intuitive and natural. And
yeah, Oggy is opposite of Hitchcock, or
but and the good thing is that we shot not exactly, but almost like chronologically, yeah. So, and we started shooting at the end of February when it was almost winter, and when we finished the film, it was weather like this, sunny, and everything was green, and you see these insects at the end. So it's, yeah, it's you adapt, and you I mean, create non-stop, change the script and everything. But the rhythm was always, yeah, it was important, and then you find it in the editing and with the sound. I had a script for the sound, for example. Like when we were doing the design and the mix, the sound was the one who will, you know, especially because there was no music in the truck.
Yep, over there.
Thank you so much for the movie. It was great. I have a question. What was the response to this movie so far in Serbia? And have you had a response to this movie in Kosovo as well? Thank you.
Well, the response was somewhat expected. And the problem was that as soon as it was announced that the film is finished and then it will premiere in Cannes, basically the newspapers in Serbia and tabloids and some of our colleagues wrote like, oh great, the film is in Cannes, but the bad thing is that it's about this case. And it basically, they said the film is about Serbians killing Albanians, and it kind of reduced it to this one thing, and it kind of put it into this context of that we were doing something unpatriotic or even anti-Serbian. And then it took 6 months of this. People were competing who will attack the film and us more. And it lasted until the people had the chance to see the film, because all of these attacks, these 6 months, were basically people who didn't see the film and are not interested in communicating in this way. And there we had also like 2 or 3 reviews written by people who didn't see the film. And yeah, I have like 1,000 pages of comments and threats on social media and stuff like that. But when the film was shown, we had an amazing premiere. Like, there was 1,200 people in the room, sold out. The 5 next screenings at the festival were sold out. And basically, these attacks stopped. It was another mode. It was a mode of ignoring the film and like it doesn't exist. And actually, when they were attacking the film, at least they were doing some marketing for the film. And when they put it on in ignore, the film started in distribution, then the cinemas didn't want to take it. They were scared. They didn't. Not even, there was no censorship, but this self-censorship where they're thinking, oh, if we show this film, we are doing something bad, and some of the politicians or of the ministry will not give us the money for the next year. So basically, we had 1 or 2 cinemas in Belgrade for a week or 2, and then we had few cities that showed it for 1 or 2 days, and that was it with the distribution. But with no marketing and with no trailer in the cinemas, with no, you know, like commercials, with nothing. We had 10 posters, and that was it. So it just passed. You know. And the television is not going to take it. That's what they told us. And it was screened in Kosovo in January in 1 cinema in Prizren, and that's it. It's also not very well. I mean, not very welcome, but I mean, it's also because of the style. It's not only because of the subject, of course, and of the rhythm and pacing. I understand that not a lot of people are ready for that or don't like that, which is okay. So it's, yeah. In Kosovo, it was in prison in January, and I mean, the reactions we got, it's always nice. The people who see the film, they write, they're reacting very well. But even in Kosovo, I think it was reduced to this war and to this crime, and people don't want to see the war. The people who went through this war don't want to see it on the screen, you know. They're always like, what do you know? You were a kid, what do you know about it, you know?
We can take one more question. Yeah, right there.
You talked about minimal lighting, but from the very first scene, which I thought was incredible, that hillside, it seemed absolutely the right amount of lighting. I mean, I thought that was extraordinary the way it was lit, and I really loved that part of the film. So,
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it was minimal lighting because, let's say, 30% of the movie is happening in a truck. So, you know, while he's driving. So yeah, we just constructed the truck in a way to, you know, to work for us, you know, because the movie is happening in one day basically, right? And we shot it in 5 weeks. So the trick was to have the continuity in lighting. So the truck that we constructed for our needs, we just put a hole in a ceiling, you know, to let more natural light in. So we were blocking it or opening it, you know, depending is it sunny or because the idea was to have a diffuse day through the movie, and after that night spent in the military base, when he comes back home, it's going to be sunny. Like, so that's what we were trying to do and hopefully achieved, you know. So that was the biggest task. But all these scenes where he stops, like the wedding scene or military, there was lights, of course. We use lights, you know, for all the interiors or some exteriors, but it was really minimal. Like I even didn't have a grip and a gaffer. It was one person who was doing both things, and just 2 more people helping him out. So it was fun experience.
I think we can take one more quick question, if there is one. No? Yes, here. All right. It's a microphone right there.
Really, really enjoyed the film. Tremendous writing, tremendous directing, and the cinematography was outstanding. There were several, speaking of cinematography, there were several smaller but very poignant moments that I recognized that I thought were just very special and organic as they were happening. I'm thinking of a lot of stuff at the rearview mirror. When the police were behind him, he wasn't sure if he was getting pulled over or not. And then we finally saw the boy's bag dangling from the shoulder. He could tell that the guy had hitched a ride with him. Also, when he was washing out the truck at the end, the close-up of the dirty water being washed out of the truck and the marble. When it comes to these like very specific, nuanced shots, was that something that was predetermined, maybe storyboarded like that, or did you kind of get there in the moment and see, oh, this would be great to do this, and kind of just capture it when you organically as it was happening?
Well, kind of both. You know, some of the shots were planned before, and some of the shots, some of those that you just mentioned, we found on the set. Because that's how Augie works. He likes to, even though if he had an idea, if it doesn't work, you know, he will change and we will try to find another solution. But the idea was, you know, to always be with him when we're with him, you know, because as he said, the story about the tree and the walnut and, you know, growing from the pocket, and that's how he constructed the whole story. So you're following one character and then you know, wander with another people, like the tree, and that was always in our mind, you know, like how to achieve that when we're with him, just to be with him. So the reflections were a big part of it, you know. So, and when you're in the truck, you know, we didn't want to shoot him through the window unless he leaves the truck and the camera stays inside. So with that being determined in the beginning, you know, we didn't have a lot of options to move around the truck. So the review mirror was always like a very useful tool, you know, just to open it up a little bit and to show what's going on outside. And yeah, reflections also, yeah.
This scene with the washing of the truck and with the marble, it was maybe the only, or one of 3 scenes that I didn't change. So they were really prepared. I was really scared how to do these things. So when I was really scared, I came prepared on the set. Yeah. And basically I did it like, it was like, that day we did 10 shots. Most of the days we did 2 shots. So these with the cups, and the edit was supposed to be 3 shots. In the film it's like 1 shot with this, she put this small, how do you say, slider, and then with the movement, and then you practice it, and then the dog appears out of nowhere in that shot, and we give him some food and try to keep him there, and then you work out.
Yeah, we have a lot of stray dogs in
Yeah,
in
they're
Serbia,
basically,
so-
you know, that dog was the acting dog, so that dog was like there for us, but all the other dogs were just there. For example, at the military base, these 7 or 8 dogs, they were just there. Yeah, they
just
were
came
just
in
there.
for
No,
the
really.
shot,
I mean,
yeah.
they came for the shot. And,
They were perfect actors. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your dog film or no?
I have some idea, but I'm not gonna talk if it's until I start producing or I get the money. So it's just an idea.
Okay, but there might be a dog involved. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in every film there's gonna be dogs that I work on.
So I think we're out of time, but Ognjen and Tatjana, I want to thank you both for being here. Thanks a lot for the film.
Thank you.
Opening in August. Thank you.